Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Fish podcast where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Brian, aka JiveGoose. While generally associated with the band Goose, Brian is also a longtime Fish fan, having first seen the band in 1995 and has since numbered over 75 shows, including the legendary Winter 1997 European tour. He fell in love with Goose in early 2019 and started the JiveGoose Twitter account shortly thereafter, where he is now the leading source for band news, setlists, and rankings in the community. Brian, you can say hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being on today. Really excited to dive into some Fish with you. You know, we talk about Goose all the time, and so this is an area that you and I guess, haven't explored together yet. But I'm really looking forward to it.
Stoked.
Yeah, of course. So how did you get into Fish back in 1995? What was that?
So it was I think your kind of normal run of the mill transition from Grateful Dead into Fish that was happening around that time, probably for a lot of people. Certainly for most of my friends. And so just first years of college, just sharing music, around the friend group, and ultimately, Fish probably came up for us in probably like 1993, I would say, is when I had my first tapes. And yeah, I had some really close friends that were really big Deadheads.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, we had all kind of heard of Fish and were starting to listen to Fish, the group really spent a lot of time listening to the Grateful Dead at parties, just hanging out. I mean, it was pretty much Grateful Dead all the time.
Must be nice. I wish they played the Dead at parties now.
So I really latched onto him, probably the most in my friend group. And yeah, I was going to the University of Nebraska at the time. And so in fall 95,
Ooh, that was your first show?
Fish came to Lincoln, Nebraska, which is also where I'm, it's where my family lives. And, I finished high school in Lincoln and went to the university there. So yeah, huge hometown show. And
what a show.
What a phenomenal show.
Tweet Prize opener that,
Yeah. So Tweezer Prize was the first song I saw live. Phenomenal show. And, Trey wearing red for the Huskers. It was a home football Saturday, actually.
Was that the show where he's wearing that really tight red shirt?
He's wearing a red shirt. I don't know how tight it was.
I think that was the really tight one.
But yeah, it was
a weird. Anyway.
Yeah, so home football Saturdays in Lincoln, Nebraska are kind of a sight to behold. So tons of people downtown. The venue's was pretty much right downtown. So I'll never forget that night. I mean, it's so many memories ingrained in my brain from that night for a number of reasons.
And just over a year later, you traveled to Europe to see them. So did you see a ton of shows in '96, or was it just kind of like an opportunity to travel Europe and also see a great band?
So winter of '95, I decided to take a family friend up on their offer to move out to Northern California. And so I pretty much just got a one-way ticket and packed a suitcase and stayed with a family friend in Santa Rosa, for a month or so. And then I got a place with some other kids that I had met. And so that year, so the next shows I saw were Red Rocks, Park City, and then Red Rocks. That run that kicked off the summer tour in '96, and then that fall I did most of that West Coast tour, which ended with the Vegas show, 12/6/96.
That's a crazy show.
So. I had a little bit of a gambling streak in me. And I guess I probably still do. But so that night, that show was was the Aladdin Theater right inside the Aladdin Casino. So you walk out the theater doors and you're in the casino.
Hmm.
So it was a really cool experience. So I immediately hit the blackjack tables once the show ended, and I want to say I won about $900 over the into the wee hours of the morning.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was pretty happy with that. Drove back up to Santa Rosa, and I mean within a few days they announced that Europe tour. So I had all this fresh money burning a hole in my pocket. So my first thought was, well, yeah, let's do this. So bought a plane ticket. Um, and these were the days where you had to call these venues in Europe to buy tickets. Um, so that was an interesting experience. There were cases where you couldn't really get an English speaking person on the phone. I
Hmm.
don't remember if that was Brussels where that happened or Paris, but so yeah, just got set up for that. I was doing the Fish AOL chat room back in those early days
Nice.
of the internet, and so I just kind of people were putting the word out like, hey, who's going to Europe? And so I started a chat with a few people. I went by myself, so I ended up meeting up with a girl who was from Boston who was also going by herself, and we talked on the phone a couple times before the trip, and just really enjoyed talking. And then of course we met in London that first day, and then traveled together for all the shows that we hit. And
Hmm.
then I ended up moving to Boston a few months after I got back from that tour. So
Nice.
um, and yeah, and I know we'll talk more about that Carini today as well.
But yes, so we are talking about Carini. I did do this is the second episode if we move through stormy weather about Carini. You can listen to episode 12, where I talked to Karina Reichman about two Carinis that were impactful for us seeing live. That's a great episode from last spring. But yes, today we've got two very, very heavy hitters on the docket. You obviously picked the Amsterdam 97 Carini, the debut, and I'm going with the recent favorite 10-16-21 from San Francisco, which I'm not 100% sure yet if it's my favorite Carini ever, but it's just so insanely good. So we're gonna continue your Europe '97 tales and tell what was it like in the room of this Amsterdam show?
It was, I mean, it was amazing. It was at the time certainly unlike anything I had ever experienced. So much like today, pre-show, everybody's kind of just huddling up in their groups, chatting, discreetly getting high.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all the kids on the floor sitting in circles. So it was no different in that regard, other than the fact that everyone is just openly getting high.
Right.
So
It's Amsterdam.
so yeah, experiencing that inside of a venue like that was definitely special. And like I said, I mean, it's just so cool and unique,
Mm-hmm.
especially as kind of a younger person when you always have to be so secretive, and everything has to be on the down low. So really cool just to be out in the open, just getting high. I remember right when everybody, I mean, everybody's getting high in there. It's
It's Amsterdam. Yeah.
as you can imagine. Yeah, it's Amsterdam, so you know it's the place is just enveloped in smoke.
Yeah.
And then another thing I remember is, right when the lights went down, someone in our area had brought in, I mean, some kind of, this joint had to be, okay, so not as big as the joint that Coach smoked in Perry.
If you don't know, you should look up the joint that Coach smoked in Perry, New York, June 2021 Goose shows. It's pretty big. So not as
But
big as
this,
that.
but this thing was, oh yeah, I mean, at least probably a foot and a half long, and
Ooh.
with a diameter of probably 2 or 3. I mean, just a monster joint, and this guy started passing around, and so it was comical.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously not a huge venue. I remember that. I think the Paradiso, it's an old church or something. Um, I haven't revisited that in a long time.
Let me see the
Um,
capacity. Capacity Paradiso Amsterdam. It is a 1,500 person venue, and so you had just seen Fish in the fall in arenas in the U.S. So this must have been a very different experience.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, honestly, that was a big part of the draw for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I was ready to go see Fish anywhere at that point in my life.
Yeah.
So this idea that, oh wow, I can go see them in tiny venues by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And this was certainly these were the peak years of my Fish experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I fell asleep every night with headphones on, listening to tapes.
Right.
So it was just ingrained in my life at that point.
Right.
So yeah, and it's funny. I look back, and I mean, we didn't really do any sightseeing, or
You were
this
there. You
this
saw
this
Fish. You
trip was all yeah
traveled.
this
You
this
saw
trip
them
was all
again.
about seeing Fish. Now, to be fair, I mean, you spent a lot of your days just on the train
Traveling.
to the next town,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you're trying to find a spot, and um, obviously a different experience than it would be today with the ability to use your smartphone for everything.
Right. And at the
Um,
time, back in Connecticut, some young children were growing up to form a band that you would fall in love with next.
yeah, yeah, or maybe their parents were falling in love.
That was that's my age.
Oh, that's you. Okay, okay, that's
I
that's
at the
your
time
yeah.
of this Amsterdam show, my parents were 3 months away from getting married. Um, but so let's talk about the music here a little bit. That big second set chunk of Down with Disease, Carini, Taste, Down with Disease is legendary and has been for so many years. It's such an important turning point for the band as well. Um, and this tour was such an important turning point for them. It's the midpoint between, them trying to figure out where to go next in 96 and, the funk explosion of 97. And really over the course of this tour, I think, the sound was changing a lot. And even in this Carini jam, it's 21 minutes and they go through so many different jamming modes, it's crazy. But so what was your first impression of this, crazy segment of music?
Okay, so yeah, this was fun to listen back to. I haven't listened back to it for a while. Um, yeah, I mean, down just a really good down disease, just in its own right. Kind of kicking this thing off. Um, and yeah, I jotted down some notes to just kind of help gather my thoughts because, like you said, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is such a monumental section of music. Um, and just obviously I don't want to talk too much about the down with disease, but like I said, I mean it's really good in its own right. With probably I want to say like 5 or 6 minutes left of that down with disease. I mean it really gets dirty and dark,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just funky underwater liquid bass bombs from Mike, and just
Yeah.
some kind of laid back start stop jamming, um, and then ultimately that morphs right into the first ever opening Carini licks, um, and obviously no one there knew what this was, so um, before the vocals kicked in, it was just kind of, oh, this is really this is interesting
This is
stuff,
gnarly. Yeah.
um, and so the verses and any semblance of the song that would later developed is really all abandoned within 3 minutes
Yeah.
within
I
3 minutes
think,
of the opening licks.
yeah, they kind of modulate at like 4 minutes in, which is like, barely a minute into the jam, which, I think was kind of a shame because I really liked that first minute of, continuing that funk groove they were in because it's so different from where Carini ends up. And it's so much slower, so much thicker. The riff that Trey plays is like it's a slightly different variation of it. And so to me, it was a really interesting, transition to come to happen so early in the jam, especially, when I think of, 97, they're, really patient and long drawn out funk jams, where this is still has that element of craziness from, 94, 95, of like moving from one thing to another. So that was a really cool thing for me, for sure.
Yeah, very much. And yeah, it is interesting to listen back to back from this first ever '97 Carini to the one that you chose from just this past year. And we could talk more about that later, but yeah, I totally hear you from your perspective, kind of going backwards to this one, how that must have sounded, and just the overall sound of the band, the mixing of the recordings. I mean, everything just sounds a little bit different.
Yeah, and this Carini, there are a couple of points in it where I thought it could, segue into a different song. Like I thought they could go into Llama. I thought they could go into Llama around 6.5 minutes in, very, very easily. Like and towards the end when they're hammering that like D vamp, I thought they could go into Free. But it's interesting, they stick with it and they keep searching for new lands, and they end up in that Yem jam at one point of the quiet section, which is really, really cool. Like,
Yeah. Well,
and
yeah. So yeah. I mean, you're right. This has so many unique kind of changes and themes. Um, but yeah. So coming out of that, that initial kind of shift out of the song, I really like the just it's a they build the tempo, and it's really to a frenzy almost.
not
um
almost, it is to a frenzy.
yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah. And yeah, and then around 8 minutes Trey just takes off.
Yeah.
um
And in this
and
jam right here, I really hear the birth of what would, come to dominate a lot of the jams in fall 97. This crazy Trey starts shredding and, kind of more Hendrixy kind of thing. But it's, you hear so many different elements of what the band would develop over the course of the year just in this 20-minute segment. And yeah, to me, again, like a lot of my problems with Fall 97, the band does feel a little bit disjointed for the first couple of minutes until, just before 8 minutes, when they finally seem to all kind of meet up. Like Trey and Page feel like they're playing different things for the first few minutes of the jam there. But just before 8 minutes, they finally meet up. Fishman is absolutely crushing it as he does. And yeah, it's just incredible. Mike's bass line at one point almost sounds like he's playing like a variation on Wipeout. It's just, yeah, it's a really crazy machine gun jam. It takes a few minutes before they all feel like they're on the same page to me.
yeah, which is cool, considering at this point, we're talking about 8 minutes in, um, to Carini, but this is also coming off the back of that huge Down with Disease.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so the patience is impressive at that point. They really, in a debut. I mean, every from every angle you come. I mean, it's it is really good jamming and really patient play to kind of find their way around,
Mm-hmm.
meet up, and then figure out where they want to go next. And I mean, after Trey, yeah, and I had the same thought. During that, between like 8 and 11 minutes, I had the same thought about, yeah, this now sounds like fall '97 jamming.
Mm-hmm.
And by 10.5 minutes, it's just a freight train. I mean, it's
Can't be
such a great
stopped.
jam at that point. Yeah. And then around 11 minutes, Trey starts looping, and
Those
and
loops, I had a big problem with those loops. When they start to change the motif of the jam and it just continues to go on, like, you know, there's a point where it just becomes annoying. and they
I
got to that
loved it.
point.
I loved it. And then Fish and Page lock into kind of a somewhat syncopated or staccato groove.
Hmm.
Um, and then that kind of disassembles down into a series of stops and starts on Fish's beat, the type of thing that people would be wooing
Yeah, if they did that now, and
in
then they take
3.0 for
some
sure.
really long pauses, like
Yeah.
they'll stop playing for like 10 seconds and then go back into the funk groove, which I found interesting. It's like they're purposely stopping the jam and making it feel weird. Like I'm sure that must have been weird for you in the audience as well. Like are they done the jam? Are they are they going to keep playing? Like because they're stopping for a chunk.
Yeah, yeah, I recall that as well. A couple of lengthy pauses, um,
Yeah,
but
and
when they brought that back, and now so at about 15 and a half minutes, everything just collapses into such a beautiful place. And then this is where when you're talking about the chill part of Yam. That's exactly
mhm.
what I think of every time I listen to this.
Well, that's what it is. At first at 15 and a half, to me it sounded like Fishman thought the jam was ending and that he was like, and he plays something that sounds like that's it. But then Trey, comes in with this feedback, and Page comes in with the organ like 10 seconds later, and he uses the volume pedal to just sweep it in so beautifully. That moment blew me away. Um, I absolutely loved that, and it was just dreamy. Trey doing just all textural work, and if you think about where they, what the jam sounded like 5 minutes earlier, they go from this runaway freight train guitar shredding craziness to this serene and calm jam, and then Fishman picks up around 16, just after 16 minutes. Fishman starts playing his like little ride cymbal thing from the quiet section of Yem, so then
Yeah.
it's a full jam on it. But yeah, that was really cool transition.
And then yeah, and then you get to about 19 minutes, and Fish and Trey just kind of propel everything
Mm-hmm.
back into that final melodic jam that ultimately melts into taste.
And for me, it really reminded me a lot, in some ways, of the ending of the San Francisco Carini that I picked. A similar kind of bliss jam, similar sounding progression. Obviously, they approach it from two very different moods. Obviously, the San Francisco one is a lot more energetic than this, but that's it's not a knock on this very blissy jam. And the San Francisco one for me is also a very interesting juxtaposition of two jamming styles, because for the first half of that jam, they're in, or it's not for the first half, but there's that middle segment where they're in that weird synth drenched, loops, space as well. And, this one, obviously a rare, all timer jam happening in the encore of a show. you know, as I talked about this in the last episode when we talked about the bracket. When this Carini happened, it was 2:30 in the morning here. I was webcasting, and it came as such a shock, when Trey rips into something like that in the encore. Now, I know obviously these days you're listening to a lot more Goose than you are Fish. And how does this how does the San Francisco Carini hit you now?
So, yeah, so you bring up a good point there. I haven't been listening to a lot of Fish, and in fact, when they came back in 2021 with so many shows, um, I was struggling to kind of find the time to keep up,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously at this point, my first choice is Goose, and I spent a lot of time, listening to Goose. And so yeah, so I still have the Live Fish app. So I'll rely on folks and just kind of conversations and banter and chat that I see on Twitter to kind of give me a sense of what I should go grab and listen to. Um, and I do like the style. I do agree with a lot of the feedback around 2021 Fish and just how well they were playing. The improvisational skills by these guys is so off the charts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and look, I can't disagree. I mean, I saw most of my shows in 1.0, and obviously I recognize the greatness of that era. Um, but I would have a hard time wholeheartedly disagreeing with people that are out there saying that Fish is playing some of their best music right now,
I
and it's
like the way
different.
you
It's
think.
different music.
Mm-hmm.
Their jams
Very.
are, yeah, and that's one thing that I noticed about this Carini jam, um, that you picked is I have a I do have a little bit of a hard time sometimes staying, like, it doesn't feel danceable to me at some point. And
Interesting.
you know I I have a little bit of a hard time sometimes kind of staying engaged, with some of what I hear from Fish when they do go deep. um, I like it, but there is that part of me that always kind of says, well, this isn't moving me,
Right.
you
So
know.
I guess that's what grabs you about Goose a lot too, is because for the most part with their jams, they've always got that, that danceable beat happening.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Fish did that,
Yes.
and now
97.
they're exploring new territories and just soundscapes and textures, and it does sound cool. I feel like I start to hear, I don't want to say the same jams because that's not fair, but there is a style
Mm-hmm.
that I hear jumping out a lot of these 20-25 minute jams that Fish has been doing, um, over the past year or so.
Yeah, and
And
that's the sci-fi soldier kind of influence on the jams they played last year. A lot of synth trays, synth pedals. But to me, this Carini, um, just the way the band so effortlessly moves from this beginning. They modulate into a bliss jam pretty quickly. Nice major key, and then Um, Trey, like, very smoothly just goes right back into minor around 8 minutes in. The rest of the band stays in major for a while. And then slowly the band just kind of dives into this, much darker jam led by, what Page is doing on the Moog 1, which is just like, to me, it just sounds like, like, well, his initial, kind of rise on the synth sounds to me like a wave, like kind of rising out of the ocean. And then it's just like something like some of the weird, crazy things that he's doing later is like a wave like crashing on the beach or, whatever. That's just how I envision it. And comparing that to his synth playing in the Amsterdam one, where obviously his synth arsenal is very different. Like this is, the Winter 97 tour was the last tour before Page got his Yamaha CS60, which would come to define a lot of the band's jams from 97 to 99. It's the one it's the meat stick synth. You hear it all over 97. He used What's the Use now. But all he's got on this winter 97 tour is the little Moog Source synth. It's the one that he's had since 94. And at this point, his synth playing is obviously not a focal point of what the band is doing, as it is now. But he uses it as an opportunity mostly in kind of like, kind of soupy sections of the jam. So when that Carini gets into that soup, you can kind of hear Page making computer noises, kind of almost in the background. So, he's not taking a lead role on the synths yet, which he would be doing in just a few months. But it's cool to hear, especially knowing where they're going to be, that summer in 97. It's cool to hear, how they're kind of adapting to the new funk jams without, fully getting there yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, this San Francisco Carini, I mean, this few minutes of darkness, from around 10 minutes until 10 minutes until like 13 minutes, is really, really cool because Fishman just keeps pushing, and just like in the Amsterdam version, but in a different way. He keeps driving the jam, and obviously it's John Fishman. He drives every jam, but there are certain times where he sticks out to me as like, this jam could collapse into space very easily, but he is insisting on pushing this beat forward. That's what I think it makes a lot of jams like the Deer Creek Simple so incredible. Is just because of what Fishman is doing, and the way he pushes there, while Trey and Page are both doing a lot of textural and loop work and getting weird with it. But yeah, I love that. I love that middle segment.
Yeah, I really so I did enjoy very much the first jam, and then this middle part that you're talking about, and yeah, it's interesting. Fishman really does. You look at a lot of these kind of ambient or just heavy effects laden type jams that are happening, and it's really easy to get lost in what Page and Trey are doing, especially, and Mike to a lesser extent. But just because these sounds are so interesting to our ears, so it's really easy to hone in on that. But yeah, Fishman is really affecting a lot of the shifts that are happening. He's steering this in many ways as much as everyone else, if not more in some cases. And his playing is so nuanced and unique in so many ways. And in jams like this, where it kind of, because after that middle section, when we get, kind of past, I guess for me, I was talking about like 12, 13 minutes, when things kind of really just go out into effects world. I kind of mentioned, well, yeah, it's not as danceable, or, you can lose focus if you're not listening closely, or, if you're not intent on hearing everything. And so what I do find is that while I am focusing on that and things are going off in that place, Fishman is sometimes one of the more interesting band members to listen to.
Right.
Especially when you give something like this a couple listens.
Yeah.
And kind of try to listen for different things. It really does start to stand out how unique his playing is, and how much he is impacting.
Yeah.
The various places that these jams go.
Yeah, and obviously now I want to talk about the last 4 or 5 minutes of the jam, this incredibly euphoric peak that it really just kind of comes out of nowhere at around 13 and a half minutes. Page and Mike initiate this this bliss progression, and Trey immediately latches onto it, with the kind of delay and echo stuff that he's doing. There are a lot of jams where you can hear him use this kind of effect and style that he uses at the beginning here. Also, the Dick's Carini from 2017 has a peak that utilizes this. Were you there?
I was.
Great show. But, what's cool to me about this ending thing, and, a lot of what we saw in 2021 with Fish is Page using the Moog a lot more than he's using the organ. And he uses the Moog one in this ending peak in a role that would normally be filled by the organ in previous years. So as this long sustained chord, and I think it adds such a different dimension to it than when he would use the organ. You've got this, obviously, the synthier sound, but it lies below, Trey's playing more. And I think it's more of a textural and background things. I think the organ is more up front to the jam, but this peak is something that I come back to over and over and over, and they just build, and it's so wonderful to listen to.
Yeah, the peak and the ultimate return, obviously in stark contrast to Amsterdam, where the song was abandoned and they hadn't really. Shortly after, the next Europe play, and then when they finally brought it back at MSG, they had worked a lot of that out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the Amsterdam version, we never really got that triumphant return and completion. But yeah, the ending is good. That was certainly, I was happy to hear them come back into that jam, after the effects journey. But yeah, loved the finish. For an encore, when you add in that context, it was definitely an impressive version in that right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did listen to shortly after it was played, the Pelham version,
Mm-hmm.
From July 30th of last year. I think is probably my favorite of the newer versions that I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've also had the Alpharetta 2018
I love
version.
that one. I love that one.
In a playlist for a while. So I would say that in terms of over the last, 3, 4, 5 years, the Alpharetta Carini is probably the Carini that I've listened to the most.
Hmm.
Um, and then, like I said, I like the Pelham. I like this San Francisco version as well. Probably not quite as much. Um, and I obviously chose Amsterdam, um, obviously because of my personal kind of association and history with that version.
Hmm.
But it's such a fantastic jam. It's almost unfair to call that whole jam Carini in some ways.
Right.
Um,
It's Carini in Amsterdam is more of just a stop on the way of the greater journey that was started with the disease. It's not even really a fully formed song yet, as you mentioned earlier, as they would work on. And to me, it's interesting that they started it with this huge, sprawling version, but then it wouldn't really get jammed out again until like 2012.
yeah, yeah.
The 12-30-12 version, I think, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was the first version to really go outside the box, like really outside the box since the Amsterdam one, which then obviously gave way to the incredible 2013 that Carini had, legendary Hampton, and Atlantic City and MSG ones, which are all phenomenal. Um, yeah, it's interesting to chart the path of Carini because it has those years like 20, 2017 or 2013 where the versions that are played are absolutely incredible. Multiple 20-minute versions played in a single year, multiple huge Type 2 versions in a single year, and then you'll go, pick another year of 3.0 where every version of Carini is less than 12 minutes. Right. And, a lot of the time, a song will consistently deliver jams, or there will be, consistently delivered jams. 1.0 didn't again until 2017 and then has since then in the case of something like Tube. But yeah, Carini is a lot more inconsistent. And so it's interesting to look at, the journey of the song as a jam vehicle.
Yeah, yeah, and you're much more well versed in the 3.0, um, historical perspective than I
Mm-hmm.
am. I do want to go. I do want to share just a couple final thoughts about Amsterdam. I think we definitely covered the Carini really well. Just to close out that piece of music, we go into the taste coming out of the Carini, and the climax, the way that the climax of taste rolls back into Down with Disease
So good.
is it's one of those moments that I can't help but have goosebumps every time I hear that.
Goosebumps.
It's and
Rim
no pun
shot.
intended. And much like
Cute.
my first show in Lincoln with the good times, bad times segue back into Tweezer Reprise to close out the first set.
Oh,
Um,
talk about energy.
just amazing, amazing climactic segues. Not just something melting into something very nicely. I mean, just raging and climaxing a song, and at that level of
Mm-hmm.
energy, perfectly segueing in into another kind of high energy song, or ending of a
Ending.
song in the case of Down with Disease. And so, at the time, what was interesting is that, of course, we didn't know what this song was called. We didn't know what
Mm-hmm.
this new Carini song was called. And we so happened to be traveling with Taper, and he was from Canada.
Oh,
I lost touch with him and most of the other folks that we met on that tour. But so we sat on the train the next day and just listened straight off his DAT, and he had it labeled as Lucy with a lumpy head,
mm-hmm.
um, and then he basically had Sickness Jam
Nice.
as a segue out of this new Lucy with a Lumpy Head song. So yeah, so I'll never forget being huddled around his dad on the train, and that's all everyone wanted to hear. You know,
Right, of
that
course.
the first thing that the next day was that whole jam. So
Of course.
and so yeah, and so it was Lucy with a Lumpy Head um, for a while, and maybe you'd be able to tell me when it officially changed to Carini.
I see. I don't know because obviously back then there was no, official set list being released by the band or whatever. So, uh, if anyone can, I probably should know this bit of trivia. But if anyone can, let us know when the fan base became aware that the band was called Carini. Was it at MSG? Was it earlier? Was it later? Let us know. But I do want to take this opportunity to segue into a little bit of discussion about this other band that we both really like. And obviously the Fish comparison with Goose happens all the time, but I do want to touch on it for a few minutes. Obviously Fish has a ton of influence on the members of Goose. All of them have said that they're Fish fans, except for Jeff, who has only been introduced to Fish in the last couple of years. If you do want to hear one of them talk about it, Ben Atkind, aka Spuds, did a great episode of Helping Friendly podcast just over a year ago, I think, where he talked about getting into Fish. And also, I did interview Coach John Lombardi, their stage manager, and we talked about Ghost last year. That is episode 6. There we go. My memory doesn't work sometimes. Episode 6 if we move through stormy weather. But I did warn you that I was going to ask this question the other day. But if you could see Goose cover any Fish song, what Fish song would you like to see them cover the most?
It's Ice.
Mm. Why It's Ice?
I think that so I like it because it's not one of the obvious choices.
Mm-hmm.
I like it because it has a it has some really nice composed music to it.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing crazy. It's not Reba level composed or Divided Sky level composed.
I mean, I would say that It's Ice is one of Fish's most difficult songs. There's that crazy middle section before the jam that's just absolutely nuts. Like, I'm not saying, Goose could absolutely, do it very, very well.
I've seen lesser bands pull off
Yes.
It's Ice, so I have full confidence. The other thing that I like about It's Ice is it does have just that open middle jam space
Mm-hmm.
for them to kind of. I feel like It's Ice is a really good opportunity to showcase, obviously, your influences, your reverence for, a band that means so much to a lot of these guys. So it gives you that opportunity. It's not one of the most straightforward pieces. So it is unique in that right. It's not the Fish cover that you would think when you see a lot of bands that might just drop occasional Fish covers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're probably not usually going to see It's Ice. It is a little bit more of a complex tune. And then obviously, like I said, that middle jam section really then gives them the opportunity to, without taking anything away from the way that Fish plays It's Ice, it allows you to put your own spin in, within the song as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what I really like about that the most. It gives you, so many different ways to approach the song for you as a band, and then also how you present it to your fans, giving them, um, a a version of the song that's both true to the original artist and also has room for you to kind of put your own
Spin on it.
signature or fingerprints on it. So yeah,
And now
it's
the
ice.
most important question about this: which member of Goose sings "It's Ice"?
Well, I mean, Rick should sing
Yeah,
everything.
I don't. Okay, Rick has an incredible voice, but I don't know if "It's Ice." "It's Ice" is a Page song. I don't know if that. I don't know if it would fit Rick's vocal range as much. So that's something just occurred to me.
Okay.
Obviously, yes, Rick is
Well,
the ideal
wasn't
choice.
Pancakes a Peter song?
True. You know what? You know what? That's true. Anything is possible. Um,
And then obviously we've got the really cool multi-part, harmonies.
yes, which Rick and Peter are very good at.
Yeah. So yeah, it's ice.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see it.
You know what, Goose, if you're listening, you should play "It's Ice."
Coach, make it happen.
Make it happen. Yeah. Brian and I, the two of us, we do like talking about Goose quite a bit with each other. And we are very, very excited to announce right now that we are starting Always Almost There, a Goose podcast under the We Move Through Stormy Weather umbrella. So the Fish episodes will continue as normal, but the two of us, are very excited to do episodes about, we will be doing tour recaps with the rest of the guys, if you remember from our episode on the Jam of the Year bracket. So the five of us will be taking on tour recaps. The first one will be coming out very soon after this leg of winter tour wraps up. We'll be talking about any albums that come out, or just other cool things about Goose that we like.
It's Goose Talk.
Goose Talk. We're very excited about it. We've teased it on social media a little bit. And if you are the first person to tweet us, tag at JiveGoose and at Stormy Podcast, if you tag us with the hashtag Always Almost There, you will be the very first recipient of Always Almost There stickers when they are created with our super awesome logo. Look out for an official announcement a little bit later this week where we will give you all the information you need on what to expect from Always Almost There going forward. We are very, very excited about it. We've already got some guests that we're going to have on in the future, some great ideas, and so we're really excited, and we hope you are too.
Yeah. I mean, super stoked. Ryan and I go way back. What's it been? 14, 15 months.
Crazy. It's been forever.
But Ryan reached out. I guess a little over a year ago now, about the first Jam of the Year bracket, and then since then it's just been a steady diet of just about daily banter, a lot of really good discussions, debates. Is the Frederick Creatures that good? I don't know.
It is.
But we've debated it.
It has been debated. Is the Perry Empress that good? That has been even more hotly debated. But we're really excited to bring you guys that banter and analysis, really, really soon. So look out for that. And I think that's it's really great finally getting to talk in depth about Fish with you. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Really excited to get talking to Goose in a more professional setting in the future. Thank you, Brian, so much for being on this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. I hope you have a fantastic day. See you next time.